to our last meeting of this season for the Native Plant Society. It's nice to see so many people, so many familiar faces, a lot of new faces too, so it's really nice. Everybody's coming out. Beautiful evening out, beautiful place here at Selby. You know, it's every time I come here, it's amazing. You always see something new here, so it's definitely really nice. One thing in the bio that I read a little bit, it said in there that I designed the world's largest container garden for the Florida State Fair. That is wrong. It was actually the Manatee County Fair, and it was a large container garden. The Florida Nurserymen Landscape Association, the FNGLA, they have a local chapter, and for a lot of years they had this huge container that they filled with plants and everything. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, they didn't have anybody to do it, so they asked Sweet Bay Nursery to do it. So I took it on, and we did this big container garden. We used all native plants, and it was beautiful, and they loved it. And it was kind of cool, actually. But it wasn't the state fair; it was the Manatee County Fair. So that was one correction there. But everything else was pretty well accurate. Let's see. Back to business. Tonight's our elections, I think you might be aware of, so we are voting on a new slate of officers. So I'll just, I don't have it written out, but for president, we have Elliot Prout, who's in the back there. Vice president, who's in charge of field trips and everything, it's going to be Steve White, right here. Thank you, Steve. Secretary is an open position right now. We don't have anybody as secretary, although Elliot has this thing called AI that does minutes for us a little bit. So we're going to try that a little bit as far as we have it. It kind of records the meeting and everything, but it is important to have a secretary also. So that position is open. Treasurer is Leah Wilcox, who's not here tonight, but she's going to continue on one more year. She's done it for a few years. So we are looking for new positions again, for somebody like treasurer. So, and then the chapter representative is Pam Callender, who's not here either tonight, but she's done a great job. She meets with all the other chapters throughout the state, and they kind of, butt heads a little bit. It's all Zoom, pretty much. So she does a great job. And then we have a great board too. We have like 13 people on the board. Chris Meyer is here. He's on the board. Nancy was on the board. I don't see any other board members right now, but we do have a good board, and most of it's Zoom. Every once in a while we'll meet in person, so if anybody's interested in just being on the board, Ryan's on our board here. Ryan's a good guy for our conservation chair. So we're all, there's lots of open seats, and it's just as good to have a lot of input on our board. So anybody that's interested on that. So I'm not sure. There is announcements. There's some fennel over there. There is the meeting tomorrow at Stony Brook. It's at 10 o'clock. I think some of the meetup, it said 9 o'clock, but it's actually at 10 o'clock. And you meet at the clubhouse,
yes,
right at Stony Brook. I think the address is on the meetup program out there. Should be a nice tour. That community, it's a gated community, and it's be a nice little tour for anybody that wants to go to that. So
to get through the gate, the password is Florida Native Plant Society.
Wow.
It's pretty simple.
You might want to get Forrest's phone number. I've been out to Stony Brook a lot, and 100% I've had problems getting through the gate.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so I've picked up the phone and called Forrest, and he got us in.
Okay. Good to know.
Great.
So we don't have any scheduled field trips planned throughout the summer. This will be our last one tomorrow at Stony Brook. The house tours, usually our field trips after the general meeting, but we moved it up. The garden tours, home tours, the last Saturday because Memorial Day being next weekend. It would probably be a busy weekend. We don't have any, like I said, anything coming up over the summer. Sometimes we'll meet. We used to do a picnic out at the beach or a party somewhere. So just keep your ears posted. If the newsletter will have something in it, or Susie Ventures, who's not here tonight, she's done great with the newsletter, and she usually sends out announcements and anything. So if something comes up like that, you'll be notified. Just so. Does anybody have any announcements or anything they want to say?
Do you have any So the garden, the house tour was done, completed, right?
The house tour was last, yeah,
Right, do you
last
have any,
Saturday.
like,
So,
synopsis of how it went? and-
what I know, we had, I think we cut it off at like 30 or 35 people. We had 3 residents. It was really good. I think everybody enjoyed the tours. Doug Horton's not here tonight, and Jay's not here either, and Annie's not here, but the 3 houses, I think they were all very well received. I was only at the first house, so I didn't get to see all of them, but I think everybody, it went pretty smoothly. There was enough time to get to every house and everything, so.
What did each house, like, each one focus on something else? Was it all natives? Was it?
Pretty much all natives, but they had, everybody I think has a little bit of non-natives in their landscape too. Doug had some bromeliads and sweet almond for fragrance is really nice, and the bougainvillea for color, but the majority of the landscape was native plants, I think on all of them, so. It was done really well, so. So next year we'll have, I think we'll continue to do it. We might try to add another house, possibly, maybe extend the hours. It's difficult traveling to each house. This year we did it, last year we did it, they were kind of open houses. You could go to any house throughout the day. This year we did it, you had to be at each house at a specific time so that the homeowner didn't have to like take up their whole day at each particular house. So we're not sure how we'll do it next year. We might do a survey or something to see what works best for everybody. So,
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and introduce the speaker tonight, myself. Thank you all for coming. This is a program I put together a few years ago. It's kind of the basics, so a lot of you might know a lot of, what it is, but the pictures are kind of cool and the concepts are all cool. So it's using native plants to, landscape your yard. It's kind of, when I've done landscaping over the years and everything, and the concepts are the same. The plant palette can change. So usually when we do design, you say you need a tall structure here on the corner, or you need a tree here in your yard, or you need a low ground cover, or you need some shrubbery in front of your windows or whatever. So there's a lot of choices. There's a lot of non-native plants out there that have been introduced over the years. But I've found over the years the native plants, obviously, you're all here for that reason, bring more wildlife and activity to your yard, and the maintenance aspect is so much better and everything. So these are just my credentials. I've been the owner of Sweet Bay Nursery now almost 30 years, and recently with my co-owner, Richard Beaupre. I'm from Ohio State, president and past president of the Native Plant Society. Manatee County Audubon, past president. I'm really into birds too, and it just goes in with the native plants. I'm involved with FAN, Florida Association of Native Nurseries, and now the Native Plant Horticultural Foundation. And we're always looking for donations there too. The Native Plant Horticultural Foundation is working to increase the native nurseries across the state. We work to try to keep up with the demand. The demand has really increased from the homeowner buying native plants, and there's a lot of new retail garden centers that have opened out throughout the state, a lot on the East Coast, down in Naples, everything, lots of little garden stores are opening, a lot of backyard garden stores, but they need plants to be able to sell to the consumer, and that's where there's a lag. So we're working with a nonprofit trying to raise awareness to get more people involved in the nursery industry. So I think you all know the benefits of using native plants in your yard besides just the beauty of them. Attracting wildlife and pollinators, and bringing activity to your yard. Hummingbirds, I haven't seen a lot of this year, but lots of butterflies, lots of other birds in your yards. Of course, they'll grow with minimal care. Don't need to water pretty much. We're having a drought right now. One of the houses on the tours in University Park, they get all their water from the ponds that they dug when they built the development back in the 90s. And that was the only place that the homeowners were supposed to get their water. Well, these ponds are drying up because we haven't had rain the last 2 years. They can't get any water. The neighbor's lawn was scorched. The homeowner that we did, Doug Horton's house, his lawn was under a lot of oak trees, and it was just a very tiny little bit. It was very green, and the rest of his landscape was very green, so less water. Survive with minimal use of fertilizers. promote not having to use fertilizers. We do fertilize plants that are in a container in the nursery industry. You need to feed plants to keep them growing and green in a pot. But once they're in the yard, the right plant, right place motto, you don't need a lot of excess fertilizers. And of course, the exotics, less maintenance, right plant, right place, no mowing. And giving it a sense of place. You know, the splash of color, you know, it doesn't really look like Florida so much as when you look at a house with more palm trees, muley grass, beautyberry, things that are native. It feels, you go out to the beach, you see native palm trees and everything. It just gives you more of a sense of place. And of course, so a little bit on gardening for birds. Barred owl, you see there, the cardinal, red-bellied woodpecker. A lot of people think that's a red-headed woodpecker. It's actually a red-bellied woodpecker. So food's obviously very important. Planting certain plants, which I'll go over later too, but beautyberry obviously is a really good one. Marlberry, Virginia creeper, velvet leaf coffee, the firebush, all good, producing fruit that a lot of birds utilize throughout the year. And of course nectar for our hummingbirds that we get around here. The coral bean, coral honeysuckle, tropical sage. I recently heard too that hummingbirds, people think they go to red plants because of that, but I heard that bees tend to stay away from plants that have red flowers. So it seems that they say the reason hummingbirds prefer red flowers is because they have less competition with bees. So, of course, foods, not just berries and everything, but seeds. That center picture there with the yellow sunflower in there. When they went to seed, we were going to cut them down, but we did leave the dead stalks for a while, and we had goldfinches in the wintertime feeding on the seeds of the dead sunflowers. So if you know, once they bloom, they're done. Most people cut them down, but it's good to leave a few for the birds if they're in an out of the way area. So, and of course, insects, very important all throughout the year. Live oak trees have tons of moths. You see all the little moths, and you see all moths that are around your lamps or your lights, you know, your porch light. You don't see so much anymore, but it's very important. Some of these little moths are probably 3 or 4 millimeters big, the actual moth. The caterpillars are tiny, tiny, but they're all up in our oak trees and all over in the maple trees. And the birds are up there looking for these little bugs up there and little caterpillars. So moths are very important. And of course echoes, don't spray, don't use really pesticides. And of course water, providing a water source, a little bird bath goes a long way. We have a few bird baths around the nursery and the house, and the birds are getting water, especially right now as dry as it is, all the time. A little dripper works really well, which is a little water or a moving water they really seem to like. One of the photographers that's a lot of her pictures, Christina Evans, she's up in Clearwater. She takes amazing photographs, but she has a little water feature in her backyard, and she gets all kinds of birds that come in, and she's in a very urban neighborhood. And just by having that little bit of water in there, you really can bring in a lot of wildlife. Of course, shelter. The brush piles work really good. Put it in an out-of-the-way area. The one residence we did on the tour, he had a little area where no one can see it, but he had a nice little brush pile back there. You'll get box turtles, lots of birds, not just birds, box turtles, snakes sometimes that aren't going to bother you. But so examples of shelters, of course, your native trees and shrubs. Diversity, cabbage palms, great for birds. Produce lots of berries. The pollinators love the blooms. Blooms are fragrant on the cabbage palm. When they're dead, even you get We had barred owls nesting in a dead cabbage palm. So it's not just when they're live, they provide a lot of habitat when they're dead also. I think I talked about that later. Brush piles are again, box turtles. We do have quite a few box turtles around here, believe it or not, but out of the way area, leave the leaves. Leaf litter is very important, a lot of organic material in there. You can get a lot of beetles and different organisms that will use that detritus. Leave the leaves, you might have seen this poster before, but for not just some of the animals, a lot of, I think the Luna moth and a lot of our moths actually, the caterpillar or the larval stage is actually lives in the leaf litter on the ground. So they don't all form cocoons like the monarch butterfly, they don't all form little chrysalis that hang from a branch of a tree. They're actually, a lot of times, they're in the leaves themselves. A lot of our grasshoppers too. Grasshoppers, usually their larval stage is in the ground, in the dirt. And if you've got just grass or no leaves, whatever, you're not gonna have some of these insects like grasshoppers and praying mantis. And, snags and cavities I talked about. The dead cabbage palm. Dead cabbage palms, when they die, they hollow out in the center. And at the nursery, we had barred owls that actually nested down in top of the cabbage palm. And we could hear them. I'm looking around like, I hear this barred owl somewhere. He's got to be right here. And finally, I realized he was inside the cabbage palm. And they had a nest, and I think they had two young out there. So it's pretty cool. And dead trees too. I mean, people tend to trim out all the dead wood out of their trees, and there's so much life that comes into these dead trees, and you get a lot of birds, and not just woodpeckers, but you get beetles on there, and you get all kinds of little bugs in there that are starting to break down the tree, and it just, you know, a dead tree can be used in a yard. You could cut it off at 8 feet high. It's not going to fall on anything. Leave some dead wood in the tree. It brings in a lot of wildlife.
Hey, Tom?
Yeah.
Are there laws about leaving snags up? I thought I'd heard that at some point.
I don't believe so, actually.
Yeah.
There was an article in the New York Times just last week about a guy in North Carolina, an arborist, who's refusing to cut down dead trees. He'll cut them down, and he's leaving the stumps in people's yards and making it too. There was a guy somewhere in New York too, I think, that had a snag garden, and he had pieces of dead wood, and he actually made a kind of a sculpture garden out of dead trees, you know. So it's twofold. You've got an artful garden in a sense, and you've got dead pieces of wood that are attracting bugs and stuff like that. That's going to attract a lot of birds and stuff like that. So
You got that at your place, right?
we have a lot of snags there too. Yeah. So and you get a lot of activity on them. So. And of course, if you don't have a dead tree, nest boxes work really well too. We have a few nest boxes up around the nursery. We get bluebirds, tufted titmice, great crested flycatchers. Carolina wrens don't nest in the boxes so much, but you will get woodpeckers. So there's 4 birds that are local here. Great crested flycatchers nest in Florida every summer. They go south to Central South America in the wintertime, but you hear great crested flycatchers around here, and they all nest here in boxes like that, in tree cavities. Your barred owls, screech owls, important too, so you get a lot of different boxes for all these different types of birds. So just a few plants we'll go through fairly quickly, because I'm talking to everybody knows their plants pretty well here, but for those you don't, Walters viburnum, great. The berries turn kind of black, and then they're kind of green, and then they turn red, and then they turn kind of bluish black. Really pretty. Flowers are really pretty. There's a couple different varieties, dwarf varieties, and then the regular tall tree-like variety. Your marlberry, great fruit, fragrant flowers, prefers a lot of shade, takes trimming very well. Really good plant because it smells so good. Birds really like it. And of course, beautyberry, everybody's really familiar with. Beautyberry can get quite large, but a lot of birds love the fruit. The mockingbirds, the catbirds, cardinals. course, your coffees, which come in a couple different flavors. You have a dwarf coffee, shiny coffee, short leaf coffee, which used to be called satin coffee, but now they call it the short leaf coffee. There's a Bahama coffee. So depending on the size, the exposure, what you want, like if you want a dwarf coffee, there's one called a Little Psycho that only gets up to about 2 feet, so it works well in different situations. And of course, firebush, great for the nectarine for hummingbirds, but the berries are really good for your mockingbirds. Love the firebush. Catbirds use it all through the winter. You get lots of butterflies. Any butterfly garden, I always say, definitely have a firebush. Zebra longwings love it. Giant swallowtails love it. Sulfurs love it, and the birds love it. Simpson stoppers, another good one. Very versatile. Depending on how it's pruned, it can be trimmed. It can grow into a small tree. It's not super fast growing, which is really advantageous sometimes for a small tree. The fruits are relished by birds. Flowers are fragrant. The bark exfoliates. The leaves are fragrant. The species is fragrance, which if you crush the leaves, they're very aromatic. Great plant, very drought tolerant once established. The elderberry is good for the fruit. Likes more of a wet area, but we have a couple in the nursery that's wet and grow them into small trees, and they flower 6 months of the year. Just beautiful white flowers, and then you eventually get the black fruit on them. Wax myrtle, that's a northern perula in the corner there. Northern perulas are here pretty much year round in Florida. You hear them more than you see them actually, because they're such a tiny little bird, but the wax myrtle berries are really loved by birds. There's a myrtle, it used to be called a myrtle warbler. Nancy, help me out here.
Well, that's a myrtle warbler.
That's the myrtle warbler?
Yeah, it's a yellow, that's a yellow rump, I'm sorry.
Yellow rump, yeah. Well, they used to call them myrtle warblers, I believe.
Something.
So
yeah,
they
I-
changed the name, but because of the wax myrtles, they really prefer the fruit of wax myrtle. So, and a real quick side note, a lot of plants, wax myrtles are male and female, so dioecious, 2 houses. So if you want to get the fruit, you need to get a female plant, and it's really hard to tell sometimes in a nursery situation when the plants are young, they're not mature enough to actually have gone to seed, so you don't know. So typically nurseries, when they sow a plant like a wax myrtle, they might do 3 or 4 seeds, so they get a bushier plant. So you actually have a few plants in there. So hopefully you would get a female in the mix there. So wax myrtle is a great little small tree. Dahoon holly, that's also, all your hollies are also dioecious too, so male and female. So if you're looking for the berries, you want to try to ensure you're getting a female holly tree. Yopon, Dahoon, both great hollies. American holly, beautiful. And of course your cabbage palm. Berries in the wintertime, when you leave them. Christmas time, the robins love cabbage palm berries. You'll get robins coming through all over them. You see a lot of woodpeckers, like your pileated woodpecker there. All the woodpeckers tend to prefer the berries. And there again, the flowers are very fragrant. Live oaks, great plant for birds. I mean, there's so many little tiny insects, little inchworms, half an inch worms all over the trees, and they little spiders that get in the flowers. So a big live oak, can support lots of different wildlife, lots of birds in there because of all the little bugs that are in there. Florida privet's another good one. Another dioecious plant though, male and female. The fruits are very high in fat, and a lot of our migratory birds, when they're coming in, the Florida privet varies very early in the year, and so a lot of the birds are migrating across the Gulf of Mexico. They're worn out. When they hit the coastal barrier islands, typically, they can rely usually on Florida privet to get a lot of fruit to build up their fat reserves, so then they can continue on up to their breeding grounds in like the Carolinas and Ohio, New York, Canada. They got a long way to go. Those birds fly a long way. Sparkleberries, another one of the blueberries, one of the vacciniums. The sparkleberry, actually, the fruits on this come actually later in the fall. Most blueberries produce their fruit in May, right around now, but the sparkleberries fruits are ripen up in the fall. And they're a little dry, but really good. Birds really like them. Nice little slow growing small tree. Of course, the sweet bay magnolia. All your magnolias are really nice. The fruits, magnolias are one of the oldest plants known. Millions of years old. It's been around a long time from the fossil record. But the seeds are preferred by a lot of different birds, little red seeds, and they spread them all around. So beautiful, fragrant flowers. And vines, and people laugh at me when I promote Virginia creeper because it can get out of control a little bit, but I've seen all the woodpeckers eating Virginia creeper berries, and I see summer tanagers eating Virginia creeper berries, and I've seen them at the nursery. The fruits are really red, and you can grow it up and let it get you don't have to let it get too out of control, but you can let it grow one season, it'll grow up into a tree that produces the berries. The fall, the foliage turns beautiful red, fall color on it, and then you just cut it off if you get tired of it, if it's taken over something, and then the next year just let it do it again. So, coral honeysuckle, corky stem passion vine, all produce those nice little fruits that a lot of birds like. So a little bit on butterflies. I'm doing in time here. Yeah. The basics, like I said, I give these to a lot of garden clubs and some HOAs and stuff like that, so I try to cover everything, and a lot of you probably know this, but a variety of plants is important too. A monoculture, especially like a little bit of lawn goes a long way. You don't need that much, but your big monoculture of lawn is just a monoculture. It's important to have variety in any kind of landscape. You want to mix it up. You get something of interest blooming all the time. People come in, they're like, what do you have that blooms all year long? Not much, really. There's not much that does that. So, and what doesn't grow bigger than 3 feet? So if you mix it up, you've always has something of interest in your landscape. Not much blooms all the time. Clustering plants together. I said plants that bloom at different times a year. Providing a water source obviously is important. And the biggest, eliminate the use of pesticides. Pesticides, if you're trying to have caterpillars and bugs in your yard and bringing in birds, you just don't spray. If you have to treat, there's other ways to treat besides spraying.
Tom,
Yeah.
how many say, milkweeds do you need to support a caterpillar?
If you just one caterpillar, one plant. So you probably, I'd maybe start with 3, depending.
Three's a reasonable number, okay.
Yeah,
That's-
probably 3.
We don't need 10.
Yeah, the swamp milkweed can get, I've seen in the wild, the Asclepias incarnata, it has a pink flower, I've seen it get almost 4 feet high. So it's pretty robust. So.
Since we bought, we're only this high, and then
Yeah.
they were gone a couple of days later.
The problem is the caterpillars can eat them up, and then you need to kind of almost protect them from the caterpillars and get them up to a certain size. In nature, the plants are far and few between, and it takes the caterpillars, the adults, to find them. It takes them a little while to find them. In a homeowner situation, when there's a lot of people growing it, we've had people come into the nursery and they've said they have up to like 50 to 70 caterpillars that they've raised at one time. So they would need a lot of milkweed to raise that many. And that becomes a problem too. I don't want to get into the controversy with the OE and milkweed and everything, but the Native Plant Society did come out and say that you should not grow the tropical milkweed or the giant milkweed, and you should plant more of the native milkweeds to support the caterpillars and the monarch population. Now, before people were really starting to raise a lot of caterpillars, monarchs especially, we didn't have a large population of monarchs in Florida, I don't believe. we had monarchs and they fed on the milkweeds that were native, 17, I think, species maybe, about there. They could support that much. You know, the plants could grow big and the caterpillars wouldn't eat them down. But now we have people raising monarch butterfly, and like I said, these people are raising 50 to 70. A lot of people come in, they have to have more milkweed because they're saying they have like all these caterpillars. So there's been a proliferation of butterflies, and that hence caterpillars. So kind of, and then of course the disease that a lot of them carry also. Yeah.
What Pam Callender put in my yard was milkweed vine,
Uh-huh.
and it's been great.
Yeah.
It's it's a little much to tame, but it supported my
Yeah, there is a milkweed vine. It's in the milkweed family. It's not an actually milkweed, but it's a milkweed vine, and the caterpillars will feed on that. There's another coastal vine too that's in the milkweed family called swallowwort too, and the monarchs will feed on that also. The monarchs and the queens. So just some plants. That's a picture of dotted horseman, really good nectar plant right there. That's one of your sulfur caterpillars right there. Sulfur caterpillars are really cool because just they're big and they're yellow and black and striped, and they're just cool looking. So milkweeds, obviously people do butterfly gardening, they start with the iconic monarchs, the big butterflies, and then they kind of graduate to the lower ones. But you know, basically the pink swamp milkweed's probably the best one for our monarch right now because it's the most vivacious plant, gets pretty big, does well in containers, in the ground sometimes. It is considered a perennial, but a lot of times it might not come back the second year unless it's in a really good spot. Like I said, I have seen it in the wild in a wet area. We were at Simi Prairie State Park not too long ago, and there was some in the ditch that, you know, was this high. Beautiful, big, showy plants out there. So it is out there in the wild. The aquatic milkweed's another good one. The aquatic and the swamp are the two that are pretty much in the trade. They're trying to come up with some other ones. There's I don't have a picture of it, the butterfly weed, which is the orange flowering milkweed. It does really well in Ohio and Pennsylvania and New York. Florida, it just doesn't do quite as well. And it doesn't get really big and lush, you know, that the caterpillars can really feed on. So there are all alternatives, like I said, the milkweed vine, which is right there, the white twine vine. So very fragrant white flower, likes it more in a wet area, does well on a container, you know, if you have it on a trellis. But you will get the monarchs coming in and laying eggs on it, and you will get the caterpillars eating the plant. Passion vines, your zebra longwing, or now I think they're calling it the zebra heliconia, is our state butterfly. Loves the corky stem passion vine. And then your Gulf literary likes it also. So the white caterpillar is the zebra longwing, and then the orange caterpillar is the Gulf literary. And typically, if the passion vine is in the sun, you're going to get the Gulf literary. If the passion vine is more in the shade, you're going to get the zebra longwing. And this plant, it can coexist almost anywhere. It can be in a tree, it can be in a shrub, it can be in a little hedgerow, and it just kind of finds its way in there, and you almost don't even know it's there until you see the butterflies kind of flying around it. And what the caterpillars do is they kind of keep the leaves of the plant trimmed, so all you end up with is just this little squiggly vine in there in a hedge or in another plant. You don't even know, it doesn't really, they coexist with the plant. If you grow it on a trellis or something, you can get the leaves, the caterpillars can eat it all up, but it will grow back. They're kind of cyclic, you know, the caterpillars eat up the leaves and then they go to their chrysalis. It gives the plant a chance to leaf out again, and then you get another crop. The flowers on the corky stem are very small, small fruits, and then you've got your maypop passion vine, which has the large 2-inch, almost 3-inch across purple flowers, very fragrant too. the maypop. Your sennas, formerly known as the cassias, senna privet. Cassia is more of a tall, does well in some shade. The Bahama cassia gets a little larger and wider, has a rounder leaf. Both typically flower wintertime, but throughout the year a little bit you'll get flowers. There's 6 or maybe 10 different types of sulfurs. Anywhere from your dainty sulfur, which are not much bigger than the end of my thumb, up to the orange barb sulfur, which are maybe 3 inches across. So, and there's quite a few different sulfurs, and they zigzag through the landscape. But it's amazing when you put these host plants in here that the butterflies just find them. You know, we've had people say that they bring a plant home, put it in their yard, and almost immediately the butterflies come in. And these plants are giving off alkaloids, smells, you know, that these butterflies perceive. And I've seen them in the nursery. They're flying through the nursery and they're downwind of a host plant, and they just kind of stop and they just like zero right in on that host plant. So important to have the host plants. Of course, the Hercules Club and Wild Lime, 2 of our native plants that are in the citrus family. Citrus trees I'll go to also, but because of the greening and the pests that you get on citrus trees, most people would spray their citrus tree, and that's obviously going to curtail any kind of caterpillars on there. The spice bush and sassafras are 2 more northern plants. For the spice bush swallowtail, they're more northern. They will grow here in a little bit of shade, more northern Florida plants. But I thought I had the red bay on here. I think it's coming up. Sweet bay magnolia, the eastern tiger swallowtail, beautiful large butterfly. The sweet bay is a very common tree throughout Florida. I've seen it right on the coast. It's from all the way from South Florida down in Miami, all the way up into very North Florida. Even sweet bay goes all the way up into Ohio and into New York, actually. A lot of different cultivars, fragrant flower. Here's the red bay, which is a host plant. The red bay is a very common tree around our area, and it is the host of the spice bush swallowtail and the Palamedes swallowtail, which are 2 large butterflies. There is a laurel wilt that's associated with the red bays now. It kills the tree. It's a real problem in certain areas, but we get a lot of red bays popping up by seed. The young trees seem to keep growing. It seems the disease seems to be killing the older trees. So for a while, people were saying, "Oh, we shouldn't plant a red bay," but they tend to sucker. I've had one in my yard for years and haven't had a problem with it. I've had some die, but some are fine, and you get new ones coming up all the time. So very good for your spice bush swallowtail. And wax myrtle again and sumac. For the smaller little hair streaks, they're not very big. They're only about an inch and a half big maybe, but they are host plants. And it's amazing, the more I've learned about plants, it's almost every plant is a host for something, believe it or not. So even your oaks, and people think of oaks just for acorns really. But the dusky wings and the hair streak will use oaks as a host plant. And you get that tiny little caterpillar that typically the damage done to trees like that, you never really see the damage because there's so many leaves on a big tree like that. People buy a small plant, they're like, well, what's eating my leaves? Because, you know, a small plant, they're looking at every leaf on the tree. But once that plant gets bigger, you know, you don't really see the damage when there's so many leaves on it. And then you've got these little caterpillars that the birds are looking for and finding out there. Smaller plant, wetland, for a black swallowtail, the water dropwort. A non-native fennel, which Melissa wasn't brought. Help yourself to some fennel over there. Fennel is a great host plant for your black swallowtail also, as well as dill and parsley and the native water dropwort. There's one other plant that's a good host for the black swallowtail too. The carrot, another native one though, I'll think of it in a minute. Mock bishopweed, yeah, mock bishopweed, thank you. Jamaican caper and limber caper, host plants for the great southern white, which we get around here in the summer times. Capers are really cool, they're blooming right now, beautiful purple flowers on them, great plants. Frog fruit makes a great ground cover. If you do have a lawn, it can grow in your lawn, you can mow it. People perceive a lawn, it could be all weeds, as long as it's mowed, especially in HOA, it looks like a lawn as long as it's mowed, as long as it's kept trimmed, you're fine. And you've got this frog fruit growing in there, and you'll attract peacock butterflies. And we get lots of peacocks around here. Lots of common buckeyes, not so common, but you do see them around here. The hammock twin flower, and the regular twin flower, the oblongifolia, is another species of the twin flower. Low ground cover, more shady, but the host of the common buckeye and the white peacock. And you hardly ever see the caterpillars. They'll be there, you'll see the butterflies. The caterpillars are about 1.5 inches or so long, kind of black, and they kind of hide under the foliage. You don't really see them, you don't really see the damage they do, but they don't eat a whole lot. The damage is you just don't see it. And of course your pawpaw, the zebra swallowtail. Pawpaws are hard one to find. We're trying to get some of the native one. The one you find around here is the netted pawpaw, the Asimina reticulata. It's not available in the trade so much yet, but we're working on it. There's a couple different pawpaws that grow out throughout Florida, and some do reasonably well in our area here. But they're the host plant for the zebra swallowtail. And of course, we'll go through some nectar plants real quick. Goldenrod, in the picture there. Dotted horseman, it's more of a fall bloomer. Great for attracting lots of butterflies, lots of wasps too. And these wasps don't sting you. You shouldn't be afraid of wasps because they're not going to sting you unless you get right in their face or like burn into their nest or bother them pretty much. They're looking for nectar just like the bees and the butterflies, and they really won't bother you. But whenever the dotted horsemans are blooming, you get the coolest little narrow-bodied wasp. I don't even know the name of them all, but wasps you never see any other time of year except when the horsemans are blooming. The snowed square stem, there's one on the table back there. The picture here is the low-growing kind of a dwarf variety. There is a taller variety that gets up to about 4 feet. Very salt tolerant, very drought tolerant. The square stem is flowers, these little white flowers all the time. Really good nectar plant. Of course, firebush I mentioned earlier. Just full of red flowers 9 months of the year. All the butterflies go to the firebush. Fairly drought tolerant, can be grown as a shrub, it can be cut down really low to the ground and come back up. It can be grown as a small tree. They get up to about 12 feet. We've grown them as a tree. We have one in a container. I'll cut it, the wood that big around like that, just chop it like that, about that high. Not a leaf on the plant, 2 weeks, just flush it back out again. But that's more of pruning. So tropical sage, really good one. The red is the dominant color. It comes in every once in a while you get a white or a pink one that pops up, but the red's the dominant color. Really good for butterflies. They all like the nectar on it. Very drought tolerant. Your wild coffees, everybody thinks of it as the red berry in the fall, which is good for the birds, but when they're flowering right now, they on the yard tour, there again, Doug Horton, the coffee was blooming along his driveway, and it was just full of bees and hair-streaked butterflies just all over it. All different types of honeybees, green bees, sweat bees. Coffees are good. The lantanas are good. The button sage especially only gets to about 4 feet tall, very drought tolerant. Fragrant foliage again on that one too. Blooms all year long, so works well in a container.
Oh, the lantana, does that run around
There is a variety of, not doesn't run too much. There is one. It's more of a shrub.
Yeah, I
It's
have
not
one
really
that's,
a ground cover. There are some non-native ones that really grow.
yeah.
Really.
Oh, is that what it is? But I
Yeah.
thought I got it at a native place, okay.
Well, it may be.
It just keeps going and going, taking over.
Well, sometimes that can be good. Otherwise, cut it back if it's getting too big. Most things you can cut back very hard, trim it very easily, and it comes back very quickly in Florida here. Florida porterweed is the lower growing variety. There is a tall variety that's not native, but the low growing flowers, mostly in the morning, the flowers tend to close up. Later in the day, in the heat of the day, the flowers tend to close up a little bit, but a really good nectar source and makes a nice low ground, very drought tolerant ground cover. I see this plant out on Egmont Key, growing in the sand out there, no rain, no water, does really well, very drought tolerant. Your tick seeds require a little more water, but you get lots of flowers. You got your lance leaf and your regular tick seed coreopsis, which is a little bit taller. The lance leaf has just that yellow center, where your tick seed has that black center. I think that's hence the name, like a little tick in the middle there. There are a few other coreopsises. Yeah, question?
You said one grows a little taller?
The tick seed coreopsis grows a little bit taller. That's the one you see out of Mayaca, real showy, gets up to maybe 3 feet tall, probably. The lance leaf only gets up to about 1.5 feet, probably.
That's the lemon one?
Yeah. And then there's the Florida coreopsis too, which blooms more in the fall. There's even a pink flowering coreopsis too. I'm not sure the species on that you find more in North Florida. So a few different coreopsises. Buttonbush, a good nectar plant, more for maybe a wet area too. Small shrub. A lot of our shrubs, especially in new homes, that are smaller lots, they might not have room for a big tree, so small shrubs sometimes work good for like a small tree in your yard. Buttonbush has a nice little vase shape to it, kind of weeping almost. Beautiful big showy flowers. Goldenrods, fall bloomers. Your Chapman's goldenrod blooms more. They'll be starting to bloom in the next couple weeks really, and it blooms almost throughout the summer. Forms a nice little patch, doesn't get very big, the Chapman's. There's your seaside goldenrod, which does get really big, very drought tolerant. I mean, it can get 8 feet tall, the blooms pretty big. Pretty sure you need to have some room for that. There's pine barren goldenrod, it makes nice little patches, blooms in the fall. Wand goldenrod, so quite a few different varieties depending on your situation. Everything's a little different. But pollinators love them. So just a few, silkgrass is a good one, but it's more of a fall bloomer. Your sunshine mimosa can be an aggressive ground cover, but in the right area can work, and you get lots of flowers and pollinators on it. Your black-eyed Susans are good, very drought tolerant again. Green eyes, I really like green eyes. There's a place out on 64, not too far out of town, on Verna Bethany Road. There's just a whole field of green eyes out there, just beautiful, showy, very drought tolerant again. Your ironweeds, beautiful summer bloomer. Coneflowers, we sell them, but they do well in a pot here, but we're pretty much on the southern limit of coneflowers. I mean, a lot of people like them because they're kind of iconic, I think, but and it works in the right spot. But scorpion tail, really good little pollinator plant. Blazing star, another good one, but it's a fall bloomer pretty much. So there again, mixing up, we show a lot of different ones. If you mix them up, if they have room where you always have something of interest. Calamit's a really nice one, nice little small perennial. Your button snake root. There's a couple other snake roots. The Eryngium is the genus. There's a blue flowering one, the white flowering one. Very attractive to some different pollinators. Your cluster vine, beautiful vine. Blue flowers throughout the summer. The starry rosin's a really good one. The silphiums. Silphiums grow all the way up into the north into Ohio and out into the plains, I think, Nebraska. Lots of silphiums, big showy yellow flowers, really nice perennial flower. Your blue-eyed grass is more of a diminutive, low-growing ground cover, stays kind of low. Your Stokes aster does really good, big showy flowers. Sea lavender, I might take that off there. It's a good shrub, but it's not real available in the trade, but it's a really good coastal plant. And when it does flower, it attracts a lot of cool pollinators.
What kind, which one would you get? Because there's different kinds, aren't there?
Of the sea lavender, no, there's just the one sea lavender.
Oh, okay.
It's a cool plant, cool coastal plant though. So how best to use native plants? You all know the answer to that. So wherever you put it is the best place, is the best place to use it. Right plant, right place. If you don't want to get the eryngium, the one eryngium likes it really wet. You don't want to put that in a dry spot. It's never going to do well. Right plant, right place. You want to make sure you know kind of what you're getting. Does it like it dry? Does it like it wet? Does it like full sun? Does it like shade? You know, how big is it going to get? Things to consider. The layout, you know, in design aspects, we usually say start with your tree, because the tree is going to be your dominant aspect of any landscape, and then you kind of work around that, you know. You have existing structures like a driveway, a sidewalk, patio, all just things to consider, you know, when you start placing what you're going to plant. You know, from your patio, you kind of want it low, and then as you get further out in your yard, you have your screening and your privacy wall, so you have your view outside off your patio and out your windows.
What about these, I mean, do you take it, are you concerned about the soil at all? Because I went to a bird garden and I was told not to do a mulberry because of the soil conditions wouldn't match where I was planting.
A lot of soil conditions, some things do like it more alkaline, some things like
Right.
it more acidic, so
So-
it's
so
a good
does
idea to
Mickey-
get a soil test. Your local extension can do a test for you very cheaply. You can take a little bit in there and they'll tell you the pH.
Actually, it's free now.
It's free for
It's free, isn't it? Good enough.
Is it?
That's good.
It's
So
free
free
for
soil
first.
test. So just take a soil sample in and get it tested. Usually the way I associate it, if it's more of a coastal plant, it tends to be more alkaline loving. If it's more in central Florida, like your slash pines, it tends to be more acidic loving. So your blueberries tend to be more acidic, your pines, your wild coffees, Florida privet, a lot of your stoppers tend to be more alkaline loving. So that's just kind of a rule of thumb. And then just kind of wrap it up, of course, Florida Native Plant Society, put that one first. Good resource for looking for native plants. Florida Association of Native Nurseries, it's a good organization. They put out the little magazine called The Real Florida Gardener every year. That's got a really good information in it. Of course, Audubon Society, you know, they have some good information on that. Natives in your neighborhood is a really cool one. You can put in your zip code and it'll come up with a list of plants that are found, you know, commonly in your zip code area. So right in there. The Florida Wildflower Foundation does a really good job of promoting wildflowers. And seed, actually, they work with the Wildflower Co-op that you can buy seed packets, whatever, in different mixes to get more wildflowers. And of course, NABA, North American Butterfly Associations, they're pretty good, strong organization. And there's more too, but
Now, the North American butterfly, who was the butterfly people who were at Sweet Bay?
at our plant sale,
Yes.
that was the local chapter of the North American Butterfly Association.
So,
The Sarasota, I don't know the
name of the
exact
local
one.
chapter?
They're in Sarasota, they have a butterfly club, there's one in Tampa, I know also.
Oh, 'cause
So-
I joined up, I never heard back from them.
No, really?
Yeah.
I'll talk to her on that. Some good books, a lot of you might have some of these, but Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy, that's a really good book. He's written a few since then. He's got a kid's book now too. Somebody mentioned Pam Callender, she works at the nursery and she's done some talks too. She comes in, she brings 3 of Doug Tallamy's books for kids associated. And whenever we get a kid that comes in the nursery, we, if they show a real interest, we give them one of his books, which is kind of a cool thing. And they get so excited, really. So, and it's important to get these young people involved, you know, to start early, you know, and to make them not be afraid of bugs and butterflies and wasps and things and snakes that are not going to hurt you, and they're only going to benefit us all, you know, as time goes on. So,
Yeah, I've seen,
so that's it.
I've seen people kill them.
Any more questions at all?
I do, when you're talking about snakes and things, like I've known since we lived where we live, that we have black racers in our yard.
Uh-huh.
But we've seen them a ton more. Is it because of our lack of water that they're moving around more, or going to the field and coming back out a lot more?
Maybe I'm not a herpetologist so much, but maybe just because of maybe more activity, or if there's more building, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, there is some building.
Around there, I had a neighbor where they developed an area, and he said he had like 6 or 7 raccoons show up, you know, where
I've
they
got a
cleared
bunch.
out a big area for another storage facility.
Oh, yeah, we need
More
that.
storage facilities, you know, to take down live oaks this big, you know, for people to store more
Or
of
junk
their
that they
stuff.
forgot about.
And the raccoons were all coming over into his kind of wild yard, you know, so it could be displacement, it could be water issues, you know. I'm not I enjoy snakes, I don't like to handle them and everything, but I enjoy seeing them, and we see a lot of scarlet king snakes, which are kind of cool, and scarlet snakes, and black snakes, and yellow racers. We have seen a few coral snakes around, you know, but most snakes, there was a thing on Facebook, the guy had a fake leg, I don't know if anybody saw it, and it was a fake foot, and he had a thing, and he was putting it on a rattlesnake to see what they did, and out of 175 attempts where he's put it on a rattlesnake, I think the rattlesnake only tried to bite the leg like 3 times, 3 or 4 times. Most of the time, it just tried to squirm and get away. It hardly ever like actually coiled up and bit the guy's leg. And he had a leg, and he was putting it way out there where it wouldn't bite him, it would bite the fake leg. But it hardly ever bit the person. It always went away. And I found that true with most critters, they tend to get away from it. Yeah.
I have a well, and I want to use that water, but it doesn't seem like it's kind of the same as when I was a kid drinking out of the hose, you know, down on Philippi Creek. Like, is it okay to use that water?
Most
I
likely,
can't believe I'm asking this.
it's probably just sulfur that you have in there. I
Right,
doubt if there's.
right.
I mean, you could have it tested possibly, you know, for
Yeah.
something, you know, but most
It's not gonna
likely,
bother
most of our
me.
water is sulfur water. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, used to drink it. When I first moved to Florida, on US 19, there was a restaurant called the Crab Trap, and this was in the, around 1980 probably, and stopped there, and they served sulfur water
Yeah.
on the table.
Oh,
That's
really?
just what they had,
right.
you know, and, you know, it's
Yeah.
well water with sulfur water. We have sulfur water from our well. We have an aerator that takes out the sulfur. Sulfur's a gas
I
when
think
you
it's why
gas
mosquitoes
it.
don't bother me, because I grew up on sulfur water.
My nephew came to my house and he's like, I don't want to go back and take a shower at Tom's house's water smells. But you get used to it, and a lot of people, that's all they had, you know,
Yeah.
so. But I don't think it's gonna hurt your plants.
Yeah,
I-
okay, all right, I'm gonna get over that then.
Yeah.
Dirty, little bird back
Well,
at night.
Thank you.
We're gonna take on, there's a few plants there, we're watching, we'll give everybody 2 more minutes, and, I'm gonna turn it over to Elliot.
Yeah.
Yay!
They're very clean raccoons, because they're making a mess in my yard. But I expect them to.
Right. Thank God that they're, that's
Yeah,
a good sign.
I got, yeah, because both my neighbor and I had taller bird bags in October, so I have them lower to the ground. So I was very so much. And so, yeah, possibly,
Before we, one more thing, before we, I mentioned the slate of officers, but we didn't have a vote. So we should have a quick business meeting, so, I presented the slate real quick. President Elliot Prout, Vice President Steve White, No secretary,
Secretary.
treasurer Leah Wilcox, and the chapter representative Pamela Callender. So, all in favor of that slate, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or nominations from the floor?
Thank you to
Okay.
those people.
Thank you. Good job.
That was complicated.
Please record it, right?